Hi, and welcome to Fathom's new Expert Series. This is where finance leaders and accountants share their best tips, real-life processes, and their top takeaways. Today's guest is Dimitri Matsouliadis. He's the head of advisory at Hailston Co Chartered Accountants. Dimitri is passionate about helping businesses understand their numbers and also to make the most impactful decisions possible for their business. He also loves health and fitness. You might see him tearing up the kilometres on his road bike in the Adelaide Hills. In today's video, you'll learn Hailston Co's three-step process for helping their clients make better decisions. You'll see the types of guiding questions they use to have meaningful conversations with their clients. You'll learn how to analyse a business's cash position. And finally, Dimitri will step us through Hailston Co's analysis tools. Let's jump in.
So Dimitri, as part of the leadership and management team at Hailston Co, tell us a bit about yourself, the firm, and what's exciting you the most at the moment in terms of work and career and helping your clients.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as mentioned, my name's Dimitri and I work at Hailston Co Chartered Accountants. We're a firm based out of Camden, New South Wales, with an office in Adelaide as well, which is where I'm based. At Hailston Co, I head up our advisory division, and I spend all day, every day in advisory. So don't work at all in tax or compliance, spend all day in advisory. At Hailston Co, our mission is to empower our clients to succeed, and our advisory division is a key component of that. In terms of what's exciting us at the moment, it's really the impact that we're able to have on clients through our advisory division. So when we think of impact, we think of two key areas, being both tangible and intangible. As accountants, obviously, it's really nice to see the tangible benefits, and they're really easy to measure and put your finger on. And some good examples of that are being able to reduce particular debt levels, trade out of situations, grow businesses to a particular level, employ more people, and so forth. But where we're also seeing a really big impact is in the intangible space as well. So a number of our clients have had their anxiety reduced by being able to better understand their numbers, feeling a bit less stressed because they now have a plan in place to trade out of a particular situation, and also having that support of experts in numbers along their side for it. So that impact that we're able to see have on clients is something that's really exciting us at the moment.
Cool. So yeah, I'm hearing the piece about you doing exciting things in the space, helping clients center on their specific financial and business goals. But what really caught my attention was those intangibles, that reduction in anxiety for your clients, putting plans in place to address specific business issues. And I think that hand-holding is what business owners really want. They want the expertise, but equally the peace of mind that brings. So suddenly, for example, maybe their ATO debt is gone, or they clearly know where cash is coming from, and those pains or stresses being alleviated because you've unlocked easily deliverable changes to profit or cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So could you share with us what Hailston & Co's overall advisory offering looks like for your clients?
Sure. So with our longer term advisory clients, generally speaking, we look to take clients from point A to point B. So point A being current state of play, how they currently are as of today, and point B being that desired future state. So be it reduction in particular debt levels, higher profitability, more time in the business, that future state, that desired future state for it. So broadly speaking, we'll have three key stages in that engagement. The first one is defining what point A looks like, so what the current state of play is, and we'll work out that current state of play by doing a financial health check to determine how is the business performing, what's revenue looking like, how's profitability, what's the balance sheet look like, what are asset levels like, debt levels, and so forth. The next thing that we'll do is help the client further define what their future state looks like, what point B looks like, and we'll then build a roadmap to go from point A to point B. So one of the key components of building that roadmap is, of course, a financial forecast that shows what the numbers need to look like to move us from where we are today to where we want to be tomorrow. And then the final stage of the engagement is the review and monitoring. So as most people can appreciate, moving to your desired state is not always a linear process of 1 + 1 = 2 and so forth. So we'll put a review and monitoring process in place where we'll look at actual results versus expected results, often against forecasted or budget results coming through, and provide that ongoing support. So if we do need to make changes due to market conditions or anything that can crop up coming through, that we're continuously moving towards our desired future state, and also providing that support and accountability to business owners.
So it sounds like a very, in a way, simple and effective ABC approach. So you're taking a business from the current state to the future desired state, and it's incorporating three things. So you've got the health check, and then the health check transforming into this business roadmap to achieve the business goals. So via a three-way forecast and or budget for the practical financial management side of things. And then the third piece is this review and monitoring stage, which takes the roadmap or plan and then cements it in these accountability meetings. So I guess the more traditional part of being an accountant, but just condensed, well, not condensed, but expanded upon from what would usually be an annual process to actually more regular meetings, whether that's monthly, 2 monthly, quarterly. So as the first step in the advisory process, can you unpack for us the tool or one of the tools or the way you conduct this simple yet very effective health check for your clients?
So if a new client has come to us, or it's a client that we haven't conducted advisory on before, one of the first things that we'll do is have a look at a health check and try to define what that current state of play is as of today. And if we look at cash as being king and the centerpiece of an organization, we see cash as a three-legged chair in which if one of those legs is not strong, then it has the potential to fall over and impact cash levels for it. So just to expand on those three legs, the first leg being profit is we want to see if cash is being impacted by profit. So profit is merely a function of revenue and expenses. So the very first thing that we'll look at is revenue. So brand new client, one of the first things we'll have a look at is revenue. And essentially we're looking to answer three key questions. The first one is the business growing? Is it declining? Or is it stagnant? The second one being, is the business open to seasonality? And the third one, which is a little bit of a housekeeping, is we just want to make sure that revenue that's being recorded is actual revenue. So in prior years, for example, sometimes revenue has been overstated because extraordinary items have been put there through COVID grants and so forth. So we'll want to have a look at revenue in its truest form, being ordinary revenue and taking out any extraordinary items from it. So if you just turn to the next slide, usually what we would do many years ago is you might pull out the calculator and see what the year-on-year growth is for a client, work out the percentage and have a look at that. But what we'll now do is we'll put the financials through Fathom and very quickly chart revenue on an annual basis. So what we can see from this graphic here is that this business is clearly growing year on year. Each year revenue is higher and year on year it's growing. So if we're starting off not knowing anything about the client other than some high level conversations with them, we now have some data behind it and we know that the client from a revenue perspective is growing year on year. So we might make some assumptions that the client is doing more, they're selling more things, they're providing more services year on year, they're growing to come through. The next thing that we'll want to have a look at is seasonality. And if we just go to the next slide, what we can see here is that on a month-by-month basis, the business is fairly stable, but then really kicks up again in the final month of the year for it. So a number of reasons that we'll look at seasonality, but some of them will be obviously seasonality can, of course, impact cash flow, and it can, of course, increase and impact capacity along the way as well. So we'll want to know how the business is operating on a month-by-month basis going through. So one of the key things that we'll use is we'll use the charting features on both an annual basis to zoom out a little bit and see how it is over a number of years, and then zoom in to see how it is on a monthly basis as well for it. So with these two key graphics, we can see how revenue is moving and start to fill out that picture of where the client's current state of play is for it. Now, of course, we'll draw a number of other graphics depending on what level of detail we have from the chart of accounts and what's readily available to us. But I guess these two are two graphics that most of the time are able to be charted regardless of what the accounting file looks like for it. And if we just go to the next slide, what we can see here is that as revenue is increasing year on year, margins are decreasing coming through. So gross profit margins as a percentage of revenue are declining. And this answers one of our key questions, which is how are expenses or margins moving with revenue coming through? If we just go to the next slide, this then draws a key insight for us, which is if we look at the lighter green column graphics in the final 2 years, they haven't overly moved, although revenue in the final 2 years has moved. And this makes sense to us because if as a percentage of revenue, we're drawing less and less out for each dollar of revenue, then it would make sense that we would have to increase revenue to generate the same level of gross profit dollars coming through for it. So as accountants, we like to use fancy terminology such as margin erosion and things like that. But put simply, when communicating to the client here, we were able to demonstrate with a very simple graphic that they were having to do more work to generate the same level of profit, gross profit dollars for it. And no matter which terminology you use, nobody likes doing more work for the same dollars coming through for it. So obviously we will use a number of different graphics and different techniques in analysing profit, but these are some of the key ones that we'll have a look at to get an idea of how is revenue moving and how are margins moving relative to revenue coming through for it. The second key component that we'll have a look at is working capital and how that might be impacting cash for it. So if we just go to the next slide, what we'll do again is we'll put it on a chart and graphically represent how debtor days are moving so that we can see what's on average the number of days it's taking a business's clients to pay their invoices coming through. And straight away through this, we can see if there are any peaks, what the trends are coming through. And obviously we can do this with a calculator and have a look at what that trend is by manually calculating it. But with these visual insights, we can very quickly see if there's something that potentially is impacting cash as it comes through. With this particular business, what we saw is that in FY21, they had issues collecting invoices in a timely manner, which negatively impacted cash flow, and that there has been techniques and tactics put in place to improve that in FY22, but still there's a little bit of work to be done for it. So we know that the payment of invoices and debtor days is impacting cash for this particular business for it. Depending on the industry, we'll also have a look at inventory days and accounts payable days to see if they're impacting cash as well for it. Because at the end of the day, we can have a really, really profitable business, but if a business's clients are taking a very long time to pay their invoices, then of course that's going to negatively impact cash as well for it. And then finally, we'll have a look at the balance sheet, have a look at asset positions, have a look at loans, have a look at drawings, and just see if there's anything there that could be impacting the cash position for it. Because again, if we have a business that's highly profitable, able to collect from their clients in a timely manner, but is then drawing a lot of money out of the business or spending a lot on assets, then of course that's going to impact cash flow as well for it.
Yeah, so getting that clear picture on where clients sit cash-wise really being the centerpiece of a lot of the work that you do, that three-legged, I really like that three-legged chair analogy. It really makes sense. So firstly, profit as a function of revenue expenses. So is revenue really revenue? Is the business growing, declining, stagnant, factoring in seasonality if it's applicable? All very obtainable from using simple charts and graphs that Fathom provides. And then into the expenses side of things, how are margins generally? Are margins and profitability good? And that inverse application of revenue and margins together. So if revenue is going up and margins are going down, not a good thing. And I've seen that flipping between monthly and annual perspectives at the click of a button in Fathom, really helping those fast insights, as well as setting up templated reports to get that sort of information and level of data. So that's the first piece with the P&L. And then the next focus of the three-legged stool being that cash situation of the business as a product of working capital. So monitoring the debtor and creditor days, possibly inventory, the trajectory of those. Is the business optimizing its conversion of profits into cash? And so if the working capital and cash flow is a big issue, then the business goals become more difficult to achieve. They don't have the cash to fund certain business imperatives, purchasing an asset, hiring a staff member, or let alone expanding or growing. It really is key to addressing working capital. It's really key to address working capital first. And then that final piece, the third chair of the stool, third leg of the stool, sorry, that asset and liability position as they relate to and impact cash. So are assets lean and sort of appropriately, I guess, financed or managed, and then has responsibility been taken in respect of loans, debt, and business owners probably not drawing too much cash out of the business. So I guess business advice has to be that two-way conversation. It's bringing two people's expertise together. It's you as the chartered accountant, knowing the detail and numbers, be able to translate that into meaningful information, and asking questions of the business owner to get their knowledge on specific aspects of the business, and getting them to then take action to improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd say as well is some of these graphics, although at times can appear somewhat basic, in terms of charting year-on-year revenue growth, they can really spark deep discussion points with clients for it. So to your point there, it's about bringing two different skill sets together. Obviously, we're looking at it from a high level numbers point of view, but business owners are able to then bring their day-to-day knowledge to it. And then that can create some really insightful discussions based off some insights that have come out of some graphics that have come through.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's the key thing is the business owner understanding your expertise and knowledge, and that really does come through in simple graphical format and charts. Like it's surprising how easily you can turn relatively, or what would be complex information or relatively complex information, for a business owner to understand in tables of numbers or Excel. Like looks like a mystery, but then you just put it into a graphical chart and it simplifies everything, much quicker to get the understanding. Cool. So can you give us a specific example of how that health check worked for a client recently?
Yeah, sure. So one client that comes to mind, if we just look at the next slide here, had revenue growing year on year. If we purely looked at revenue, and that was the only factor, it was star business, growing really, really well. Couldn't keep up with demand in some ways, just revenue was brilliant. But we did notice that cash balances weren't great. Cash was an issue in the business. And by digging into the file, by being able to see a number of insights through the graphical format, what we were able to see is that, yes, revenue was growing year on year, but what we were able to see was that gross profit margins as a percentage of revenue were declining year on year. So we then zoomed in another level. So if we're zooming out, we're looking at total revenue, we're zooming in, we're having a look at gross profit margins. We zoomed in again and we looked at the components that make up direct costs. And we could see that direct purchases as a percentage of revenue, so standardized for growth in revenue year on year, were really being eroded year on year going forward. And when we looked at all the other factors in the business, everything else was relatively stable, the odd one here or there, but compared to direct purchases as a percentage of revenue, that was really impacting profit margins for it. So what we're able to show the client there is if they could fix that one particular margin whilst holding everything else stable, that it was going to make a significant impact on profit margins and then in turn on their cash balance going through. So that's the first example that comes to mind, I guess, in the construction industry. And if you just turn to the next slide, now the second example that comes to mind is in the professional services industry. So a little bit different, client doing really well from a revenue perspective, doing really well from a profitability perspective as well. But when we spoke to the client and asked about what their future state was to be and what they wanted their point B to look like, we then were able to see through our analysis that they weren't on track to be able to meet their strategic objectives. And a deeper analysis showed that although revenue was moving well and although total profit margins were okay. There were particular aspects, particular expenses that were being overspent, if you like, for it. And we're able to demonstrate to the client that unless these particular expenses were more stable and not continuing to grow, then that the strategic objectives wouldn't have been met for it. So being able to provide that particular insight to the client then now means that we're on track to hit the specific strategic priorities that are very specific to this client in mind.
So yeah, that shining a torch on different aspects of the business, really, I guess, analogies coming thick and fast with the three-legged stool as well. But you're starting with the wide beam of the business, looking at total revenue, and then maybe using something like Fathom's trends tools in the analysis section to spot trends over a time horizon, and then using that to narrow down in maybe 1, 2, or 3 specific areas. So in that first one, for example, there was the revenue looked great, but then margins going south, and then you're able to drill into those direct costs and really offer that sort of strategic advice. So revenue being a big focus, but then margins being eroded. So revenue, that, I guess the phrase revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, comes back from many years ago.
Cash is reality.
Yes, cash is reality. Exactly.
And Tom, that's something that we really try to do on all our analytical pieces and all our engagements, is really zoom out and then zoom in for it. It can be easy to zoom into a particular aspect of the financials or draw a particular graphic that looks at a key thing, but we always like to understand how those numbers tie into the bigger picture. And I guess one of the key tools that we use in Fathom is being able to look at things on an annual basis, zoom in and look at them on a monthly basis, or look at total revenue and then look at a particular revenue line, for example. So internally, we're always talking about zooming out and zooming in on particular things.
Yeah, going broad to go narrow was another phrase I heard once. Start broad, then go narrow. Cool. So in terms of the top 1 or 2 challenges you encounter along the way when working with your clients, what would those be, and how do you deal with those challenges to help your clients?
So as accountants, naturally, or maybe it's just me, we really like granular data and being able to analyze that granular data. What we find is, particularly in the SME space, is that you won't always have data in a way at the beginning of an engagement anyway, in a way that is granular enough for it. So, a really basic example of that might be having limited revenue line items rather than having revenue line items split in a way that provides strategic insights for it. So the way in which we're able to overcome that or progress through that is by going higher level. So in that example, looking at total revenue and how total revenue is trending going through for it. So data is obviously a key challenge, but also of the view that although unless the data is horrendously bad, which is not often the case for it, there's always insights to be had from data for it. And I guess the second key approach or the second key challenge is getting info from clients for it. And one of the ways that we overcome that is by having limited information come through from clients. So often access to a Xero file is enough for us to be able to get a number of insights and then have discussions with clients. And I guess the other key ways that we get over having high level data and also being able to get info from clients is by really having that collaborative approach with clients. So in all our engagements, there's a lot of collaboration with our clients. And I guess it is possible to be given access to an accounting file, put the data through Fathom, produce a nice report and send it to them as a PDF. But we always sit down with our clients and talk through the report, talk through our findings, and if need be, talk through where there might be limitations. So for example, unable to get a particular split on revenue because we're not currently recording that split through Xero as an example coming forward. So by having that real collaborative approach with clients, we find that we're able to get a number of insights and also talk through clients where there might be some data gaps that we would like to address in times to come.
So that's interesting. That higher level analysis allows you to address some of those data challenges that you might experience. You still get to have those great insights and have meaningful, impactful conversations. then you can maybe open up your clients to understanding and learning a bit more about their business, obviously stage one, and over time get them a bit more interested in developing their data accuracy and completeness, because then they're going to obviously get better insights from you. And then secondly, that collaborative, consultative, guiding and mentoring approach to helping the clients. Yes, you could just send something, but actually let's sit down with them and just speak face to face, help them have more, I guess, impactful and tangible results by having that two-way conversation where they're really, I guess, forming a relationship with you, and then presenting and explaining the data gaps, I guess. Could be a full loop. So it's all about the communication. Cool. So one key learning you've gained from doing these client health checks? I think you said something we wrote down once. It was really hit home. I asked you to say it again in this webinar.
Yeah, sure. So I think we have a quote here. Yeah. So look, most businesses are only one or two impactful decisions away from improving their lifestyle, stress levels, and bank balance. And I feel that it's our skills as an accountant combined with Fathom to make it obvious what those decisions should be. So at first, although this might sound a little bit illogical in the sense of a business is a living organism with 101 different things that can and should go right or wrong for it. As we dig deeper into it, it does make logical sense that there's only one or two key things that will significantly shift the needle for that business. And I suppose in thinking through this, if a business had a number of different things that were going really, really badly for it, then it quite simply wouldn't exist. So if we had a business that was declining in revenue year on year, expenses were growing year on year, customers were taking longer every day to pay, and the owner was drawing enormous amounts of money out of the business, well, it quite simply wouldn't exist. And what we've found in our work with our advisory clients is that often a number of things are really, really good. We have clients that are growing their revenue year on year. Their debtor days with their clients are really good. All their clients love their work and pay them in a timely manner. But there's a particular expense which has grown, and it's been a margin that's been hard to hold. And by being able to show the client that if we can just fix this one little thing, not always a little thing, and sometimes easier said than done, but if we can focus on this particular area of the business, then it will have this particular improvement in terms of bank balance, which can have the flow-on effect to improving lifestyle and stress levels. And an example that comes to mind is that we had a client that had declining gross profit margins due to a particular direct cost. And by showing them what that was, they were able to work together with them to improve their gross profit margins, which then in turn improved the overall profitability of their organization, which then in turn improved their overall cash position, which in turn allowed them to pay off debt in a much, much quicker way, which in turn, as they said to us a number of times, has reduced their stress levels because they now have a plan and have seen their debt being reduced through this. So often we find there's only one or two things that can have a really impactful decision and a flow-on effect for that business coming through. Yeah.
A very limited number of things can have a massive effect on a business, and probably when you get through the one or two, it might be growth related. There's another thing that crops up. There probably is always going to be one additional thing over time as the business changes, but being able to focus on that and identify it and explain that to the client, and then actually help them understand what they need to do to change that. That's, unlocking the business performance optimization, the profit and the cash flow makes a huge difference. Often it can be as simple as focusing on the gross profit margin, in terms of the pricing or the product mix or anything, but it's all there when you start looking at the numbers and the way that the business is operating. And then, sorting out that one thing, facilitating multiple other positive avenues to be pursued. So yeah, with your expertise as the accountant and the product that allows you, I guess, to find these things as well and then communicate the story, then the world opens up for the client. So yeah. And as you said to me, oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, and equally to that, sometimes it's not just a decision, but an impactful decision as well. So, an example that comes to mind is if revenue is growing year on year and everything's really good with revenue, then the decision to increase revenue is maybe not the most impactful decision for it. And because rather it's that margins are being eroded or that debtor days are blowing out. So it's not just about the decisions, but which decision is going to have the most impact on that business coming through. And I think that's one of our key jobs as an accountant is to help business owners and directors understand what's the most impactful decision they can make, not just what decision they can make.
Priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, which order to work through them. Yeah, and I think you've said to me before, there's a huge benefit to being unemotional about a business. So I guess business owners mainly are very emotional. But yeah, tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so often at times you feel at a little bit at a disadvantage because you're not day in, day out in the business and you don't have the intimate understanding of what goes on every minute of the day in the business. But I think the weakness is also the strength in the advisory relationship for it. So because we're not involved in the day-to-day business, because we're not sitting in on team meetings every day and on the ground, making the products that the business makes as such, for it, we're really able to see the forest from the trees and be unemotional in providing the numbers. And the numbers are a little bit black and white sometimes for it. It's if your revenue is declining every month, there might be a number of stories for it, but at the end of the day, revenue is declining every month, or vice versa for it coming through. So really being able to be unemotional and provide the facts as they stand is I think a key strength of the advisory relationship. And a good example of that is we have a client that was meeting all their revenue targets, meeting all their profit targets, but there was a small part of the business that was underperforming and not meeting expectations, and the numbers just clearly showed that this small part of the business was not meeting the expectations that they had for that. In the reports, that's what was being shown for it. And I suppose we were able to very easily show that to the client and show the impact of that small part of the business not meeting its objectives. But I guess the longer story is that it was a key part of one of the directors. It was a division that they had a lot of emotional involvement in, and it was their little baby that they had set up a number of years ago. So being able to stand back and see the numbers for what they are, not have that emotional involvement in a particular division or a particular product, I think is a key strength in the advisory client relationship.
Yeah, totally. So, and then one final question, but we've got some other additional questions from people, but my final question would just be around technology wise. What are your go-to pieces of technology at Hailston Co? And I'm sure you'll mention Fathom. I'm sure there's a few others that you use. Accountants are always wanting to hear from other accountants on what they've seen as leading products.
Yeah, so we, like all of our clients, whether they're in the advisory division or whether in our compliance division, we like all of our clients to have really good accounting software. And one of the key accounting software packages that we lean towards is Xero. We like Xero for a number of different reasons, but one of the reasons that we like Xero is because it talked really nicely to other software packages for it. So one of those software packages that it talks nicely to is, of course, Fathom, and we'll use Fathom for all of our monthly reporting. We'll use it for our analysis, and we'll also use it for our forecasting as well coming through. So there, I guess the two key ones, depending on what industry our clients sit in, we'll then have a look at potentially bespoke software solutions relevant to that particular industry as such for it. But at the centerpiece, we really like all our clients to have really good accounting software that can provide meaningful data from it.
Yeah, I guess one of the beauties of using Xero is that you've got functionality that you know inside out, and you know where the data should sit. You've got the ability to use things like tracking categories if you want to get into the granular level of detail for clients. And then certainly from a Fathom perspective, all the feedback I get is around the sort of seamless data flow from Xero, how you bring the data in once, it's automatically updated every day, and then it flows through the Fathom platform, even to areas that you mentioned. We're getting a huge amount of feedback around three-way forecasting, which is, shaving 50% of the time off three-way forecast that they've done, either, in other softwares, and obviously even more so if they're building models in Excel, saving huge amounts of time and getting to use that really innovative side of the forecasting with the micro forecasts and business roadmap, etc. So lots of exciting stuff there.